In this short video, we're going to talk about a few special variables that we have used with loops and one major downfall that you need to make sure that you avoid. Alright, remember when dealing with loops, you can use a counter to determine the number of times a loop executes. This type of counter, because you're not wanting to keep the value that's being held in an event click, because remember the event click, when you dim a variable, you're declaring it and it resets itself every time you hit that event. But because you're in a counter, that's not happening. So these types of counters you can actually declare with dim as opposed to static, and you declare them outside of the loop. This variable, which is normally an integer, helps the computer know how many times that loop iterates or how many times it's going to go through the loop. A lot of times counter variables are I or J or K. Not sure why, but this is just one very popular thing within programming. Now, after each time you go through the loop, you may want to add or subtract some number from the counter variable to keep up with how many times. You can do that by writing your counter variables in any of the following ways, such as I equals I plus whatever the value is, such as 1, or if you're going backwards, I equals I minus whatever the value is. The shortcut way of writing is to use the plus equals or the minus equals. Accumulator variables are very similar to counters, except for with a counter you're incrementing or decrementing that counter variable by a specific amount, 1, 2, 5, whatever. With an accumulator, the amount that you're adding to that accumulator variable is going to change. It may depend upon input from the user. So you'll write an accumulator in much the same way, except for typically that amount that you're adding or subtracting or whatever is going to normally be a variable. So accumulator equals accumulator plus whatever the value is, or accumulator plus equals value. These are particularly useful when we're wanting to keep a running total. So I have some code here that's going to show the example for the accumulator and the counter, and I have put this code into Visual Studio in Visual Basic, and I have added a breakpoint so that we can watch how our variables are going to change. So I'm going to run it and click the loop button, and it will ask me to enter a number. I'm up here at the top of the code before I hit the breakpoint. So I'm going to add 5, and you see num down here is 5, and then my sum is 0 and my num counter is 0 because I haven't gone through those yet. So that is going to add 1 to my counter. Num, the value of it, which is 5, is going to be added to sum, which is 0 at the time, so now that's 5, and it asks me for more input. So I'm going to add 5 in again and step through, and you can see where there the counter incremented. 5 is added to sum, so that goes up to 10, and it asks me for another number. Now my flag is -1, so I'm going to put in -1 and say OK, and it's going to step through. And notice, because it was equal to my flag, temp num is -1 and my flag is -1, it falls out of the loop and goes to the next line of code, which is to display my output in the label. And that's it. So that's how you can use an accumulator and a counter to keep up with the number of times that the loop is going to go through, as well as a running total of input from a user. So again, we used a flag, which is also called a sentinel, and that's basically a condition that tells it to stop. So in my input box, I could say enter a positive number, -1 to stop, Or if I was bringing in a string, I could have my flag be the word stop or quit. Now, one of the things that you want to be very careful about is to make sure that you don't cause a logic error that's known as an endless or an infinite loop. This occurs when the programmer forgets to increment the counter variable. So what happens is the loop is always true. So down here at the bottom where I have x is equal to 5, do while x is less than 10. Well, here, instead of forgetting to increment my x, what I've done is I have an x minus equals 1. So what happens is my x is going to be 5, and that is less than 10, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, then 0, and then it goes to negative numbers. So in that case, x is always less than 10. So sometimes you either forget to increment the counter variable or you increment it incorrectly. So it basically runs forever. Now programs will let you know that this is happening so that you can terminate that program. In the past, it would simply crash your system. So which loop should you use? If you are going to use a loop and you know exactly how many times that loop wants to run, or you need it for it to run, you're going to use a for next loop. You're going to use a while or a do loop while when a variable is used, especially if there's a flag. So these are some special instances which you are going to want to use your new skills with loops.